Hello everyone, I had a lot of questions on exercise 4.3, so I just wanted to create this video and kind of help you figure out what you're doing here because there's not a lot of information in the book really on how to do it. So when you get into programming exercise 4.3, you've got two files here, Encrypt and Decrypt. And of course, there's not a lot of information on how to encrypt and decrypt, so it can be kind of confusing. But if you look over here in the instructions, it really just wants you to modify these scripts, and it's already encrypting and decrypting. So what you really need to do is modify it from taking a word that needs to be entered to taking it from a file. So let's look at the encrypt.py. The first thing that I want to do with this one is have it actually take those file inputs. Just as a quick note, please remember here is your full book. And if you need to understand things, you can always pull it up. Right here, we're working with text files. So I'm going to click on that. And I can go down here and I can see text files in their format. I can read this information. The things that you need to know on this exercise are right here. So the mode string is R for input files, and then the W is the mode string for the output files. So let's do the first thing. Remember, you have to think of the order that you're trying to put everything in so that it works in proper flow. I've shared some of you some information about this other program too. Let me just show you this really quick. Raptor is what it's called. If you Google search, do Raptor for flowcharts, because this is what happens. You can create these absolutely fantastic flowcharts, but you can also run them so that you know that they're in the correct logical order, which is the most important beginning of creating your program in the first place. We have to make sure that it's in the proper logical order and that the outcomes are what they're supposed to be, or it's just not going to run properly, okay? So back to this. Excuse me, I've been sick a little bit. The first step, or really what we're doing, is just making sure that we're opening the text files and using those text files, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go on line 9 here and just hit down, and I'm going to put a little note in here that these are the inputs. Okay. And then what do I need to do in order to take that input, right? I have to create a variable and then ask the user to give us something, and then that will save whatever the user puts in. That's going to save it in that variable. So I'm just going to call it in name. And ask them to input the file name. Okay. And then once they input the file name, remember we're working with both an input file, which means, excuse me, which means we're going to open a file, we're going to read it, and then we're going to create a whole new file to put our output in, okay? So we have our input, our file name right here. Now we need to ask for the out file. We're still using input because we're still asking the user to put a value in. It's always important to make sure you're spelling things correctly, especially when it comes to your variables. Otherwise, you're going to have some issues. And, I'm going to put in a distance value here too. The reason I'm putting in a distance value here is because this is an input that I want to take from the user. Okay. So that's an input that I want to take from the user. And here's the thing. because we already asked for inputs here, we asked for, you know, this. See, I could have just deleted just this one right here instead of typing that in there, because this is the same thing. You notice this is the same line that was already there. Okay, so I can delete that. Now, I don't need that anymore because I'm going to open a file. Instead of asking the user to put in a word, I'm asking them to put in a file name. Now, the next thing that I need to do is tell it to actually open the input file, because we have to tell it every single step or it's not going to know to do that. And anytime you open an input file, you're going to have it do what they like to call a primer read. So it opens it up and then it reads the first part of the file and checks those values in the file. So we want to say the input file. We're going to open it. And see, open is, it's a command. This is where I'm getting this from. I'm opening it. In name, because this is the file that I'm going to ask the user what file name they want to open. So this is the variable that I'm putting in this spot. And I need, what do I need? Do I need the R or do I need the W? Well, if we look at our book, it depends on if you're working with the input file or if you're working with the output file. Now remember, when we go here to look here, it's going to tell us on the second page here that R is for input files and W is for output files, because we use R to read the file and we use W to write to the file. So because it's the input file, we're going to put R because we're going to need to be able to read that. And then I've got to do the primer read. And they like to call this a primer read because it's, you know, again, you have to tell the system in order to read it. And it's got to go and look. Oftentimes we do the primer read. So say, for example, that we're pulling line by line and then checking to see if we're at the end of the line in that input file. We have to have that primer read. We have to make sure it's going and looking and reading. Okay. Everything else here looks good, except anytime we have a file that's open, we have to close that file. So notice when I come here and I hit my enter key, it takes me down here. We do not want this to be included in the for loop. We want to only close the file at the end. So I'm going to move my cursor over to the far left side. So we want to tell it to write the code, and then we want to tell it to close the file. Okay, so that's it for the encrypt part. Now, what we need to do for the decrypt file is pretty much the same thing. We have to take those inputs, and then we have to open the file, and then we have to close it. So encrypt is what we're going to do with a file before we send it to somebody, and then decrypt is what we want to do in order to be able to read it. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the inputs. I'm going to use the same code that I did before. Oh, and guess what? Guess what I can do? If you want to save time, copy, paste. Ta-da! Look how quick that was. Then next, I need to open the input file. And guess what? I already did this right over here. So again, I can simply copy and paste. Because when we decrypt it, we still have to open it. We still have to read it. That's why we're using the same information here. And I no longer need these two lines because I'm not Well, this one, because I accidentally rewrote it, right? I could have just left it in there and not deleted it. But we don't need this one because we're not asking anyone to put in the coded text anymore. We're actually reading it from a file. So I'm going to get rid of those two lines. And then you can leave this information because that's still all correct. But I want to go down to the bottom again. And then I want to close that file. And I got to move it all the way over to the left because I do not want it to be included within that for loop. I want it to be only activated once this is done. And this time I have to close the out file. Okay. Now, obviously, if I don't have an actual text file anywhere to read, then I can't read it. I can't open it. And because we're not putting any kind of path as to where the file is or anything like that, we want to just create our own file right here. Now, it says enter the input file name encrypted text. So I'm going to create a file. I'm going to call it encrypted.txt. And I'm just going to say hello in here. You can put whatever you want as long as it's within reason, right? And then let's run it. It does not like decrypt.py, line 27, plain text. So what happened here? Now, don't be scared of errors because when you are learning, they help you learn even more, right? And you get better and you get better and you get better. So I just wanted to point out, it says there's no such file or directory called encrypted.txt. What do you think I did here? What kind of mistake do you think I made? When you make those mistakes, explore them as best as you can, because those mistakes teach you, right? And encrypted.txt is, oh, if I look at my file up here, it's completely wrong. This is encrypted. It's not encrypted like at all. It's not. So I'm just going to throw that one in the trash. Here's a trash can right here. I can delete it. Say, yes, I can't spell. And then I can recreate it again. Just remember to spell things correctly, check, double check, and then always do it right. Okay, let's run this again and see what happens. So enter the file name. Hit your enter button. Enter the input file name. Okay, I'm going to do it again. Encrypted.txt. Enter. Output file name A. Distance value 3. And it still doesn't like my line 18. Name code is not defined. Now, this is a reason why it's important to always kind of track, like, what are you doing and what is different. So what happens here is I copied and pasted the code from the other file, and the other file we're using the plain text, and here we need not the plain text, but we need, what do we need? What are we reading here? If you look at it, okay, what is it going to be? Right? Let's look at encrypt. See this? Plain text. Okay, so here we're opening this plain text file and we're looking at the characters in these plain text. Look at this one and we're looking for code. So this should be code. Okay. Now let's run it again. output file name A, and distance value is 3. And again, we have yet another issue. And my goodness, what did I forget here? Well, this should be this is correct. This should be input file. Remember, we have here's out name, there's distance, input file code, input file dot read, but we're missing a line because we're going to read the input file, but then we have to put it in the output file, don't we? So we need out file equal open, because we have to open it so that we can write to it. And then because we're writing, we need that W. Now, what do we need? Let's see if we got it now. Enter the input file name, encrypted.txt, output file name A, and distance value 3. Now you see that it created the output file A and the program worked. So now the next thing that we need to do, this is because I didn't have anything in the encrypted text. Let me do this and run it again. Another thing you might run into is if you are in the encrypted text file, this program will think that you're trying to run from the file that you have active. So let's go back to our encrypt.py and then run it again. Input file name, output file name, distance value 3. Now it's having a problem with encrypt.py with the out file. So again, we missed, it says out file is not defined. You notice how we have in here out file equal. So we're defining this variable as out file, and we missed doing it on the encrypt file here. We've got the input file open in the plain text, but then we're totally missing the output file. Let's run it again. And now it shows us something. And it also put that inside the A. So what happens with this is it's doing an encryption. An encryption process for what we're doing here is we're just moving the value over 3. H becomes I, J, K, that's 3 out. So you see K. E, F, G, H, now that's an H. L, M, N, O, now that's an O. L, M, N, O, now that's an O. So it's kind of like it's cryptography is what you're doing here. Remember if you've ever done those puzzles at home where you had these words and you couldn't figure out you had to try to figure out what letter they actually stood for? That's what we're doing here in this process. So it comes out K-H-O-O-R because it simply moves this letter up 3 spaces to encrypt it so that someone can't just read the text. And if you don't know how many spaces it actually moved it, you're going to have a hard time knowing what that actual word is. Okay? So that's how you do it. That's how you do it. And remember, when you get those syntax errors, look and figure out what it is that's going on. Then when you come over here, you're going to run your checks, see if it's got the correct input, output, etc. and it does not. 4 out of the 5 checks passed, and this custom test here gives us an assertion error. Okay. Now, I can tell you that this is correct, and this is the expectation of the answer for this assignment. So, sometimes you're going to run in this. If this is working properly and it's creating the other file over here, that's what I am looking for from you. Okay? So, even if it says submit 0%, I mean, I'm going to be going through all of those grades, and I absolutely will make sure that you get the score or everything that you need out of what you're supposed to do, okay? Because this is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Okay? All right, everybody, I hope that this helps, and I hope that you can get in here and get this assignment done. And remember, if you need to, you can click on this reset, and you can completely reset it, because what happens is sometimes if you make changes because you're getting these errors and you get more and more changes, it'll kind of get locked up. And that's actually true for no matter what kind of program you're using. I mean, whether you're using Visual Studio or Eclipse or whatever you're using, that can happen with your program, okay? So if you have to reset it, I mean, sometimes you just have to copy all your file into a text or download your text and then start a reset or do a whole brand new thing and then start it again. And that's normal operation. It can happen especially when we're trying to fix something that we don't know exactly how it runs, okay? So if you're getting at least most of these checks, we are good, okay? I hope all is well, and please let me know if you need anything. Take care, everybody.